In the not-too-distant past, all the businesses in the game industry were summarized as buying and selling products. Anyone who liked to experience a product would have to pay the full cost, and by doing so, they would have fully owned it. As we went further, there were big changes in the business. The services stepped into the market and new definitions were made to own a game. Players no longer needed to necessarily pay the full cost to experience a game. The culture of digital fare fits into the public mind, and the services became more popular day by day. But what caused the services to change the game industry so much? How risky is the path we're moving in? How is the future of the game industry and services intertwined? Stay with me and continue with this video. The basics of the service-based market had long been established, but its purpose was slightly different from the path that the services are going on today. When Xbox introduced Xbox Live to the console market in the 6th generation, there was a huge revolution in the online network and the experience of multiplayer games on the console. At a not-so-huge cost, players could access Xbox's fast and functional network for the online gaming experience. This great revolution paved the way for more online games by game makers. At this point, the first consular service-based games came to market. Of course, as I said, the content and goals of service-based games at the time were much different than they are today. When we entered the 7th generation, more companies like Sony and Nintendo also entered such a way, further increased their online support for games. It was at the end of that generation that important things happened and the direction of the game industry changed somewhat. If we look at the games of major publishers during the 7th generation, we find that the number of single-player games was drastically higher than multiplayer titles. In other words, public taste at the time was more directed toward fictional games. We saw Electronic Arts in this generation more publishing online games, while in the 7th generation it marketed Crysis, Dead Space and Mass Effect, along with other fictional games. Towards the end of the 7th generation, sales of a large number of fictional games declined. Mass Effect 3 and Dead Space 3 alongside Crysis 3, everyone suffered from a low sales problem and ultimately failed to satisfy Electronic Arts commercially. In other words, all three games failed commercially, which is the worst news for the publisher of a game. On the other hand, Ubisoft also faced a drop in sales of many games. Either Xbox or Microsoft were not satisfied with the sale of many games, including the Fable series. This drop in sales, which was also related to the drop in the quality of the games, caused a big change in the policies of the major publishers of the West market. Companies like Electronic Arts did not see the future of the industry in fictional games. As multiplayer games became trending, the desire of different creators to make these games became more and more. To be honest, they cannot be judged. When it comes to quick and easy money, which publisher would like to give it up? Why spend the same revenue from a multiplayer game with a lower build budget when it comes to making risky single-player games? At least that was the questions that were exchanged in the minds of managers of many companies, including Electronic Arts and Microsoft. Entering the 8th generation, even Sony did not distance itself from the new policies. However, we all know that Sony's policy of monetizing its products has already been based on digital and physical sales. However, providing online services with limited content and features was not something that could be invested long-term. For this reason, the services also began to change. The main goal was not to remove online services, but to build new services with richer content. The creators decided to find a deceptive and, of course, helpful way to sell their services. What happens if players can access a set of games on a temporary basis by paying a monthly or annual fee? If you can make more money from selling games in this way, doesn't it make sense to offer products for service? With the same questions, the first gaming subscription services came to market. Sony was one of the first. Although the publisher started PlayStation Network in 2006, the company's services also needed new content. As a result, Sony launched a new service called PlayStation Now in the same January 2014. PlayStation Now was introduced on the 7th of January 2014 at Consumer Electronics Expo 2014 with Gaikai Technology. At CES, Sony presented demos of The Last of Us, God of War Ascension, Puppeteer and Beyond Two Souls, which can be streamed via PlayStation Now. The streaming service's private beta became available January 28. The service had some interesting features and was one of the first cloud gaming betas in the game industry. Players could play games using the service without putting any pressure on their console hardware. In fact, all the game details were streamed online on Sony's servers, and to do so, you didn't even need a console. At the same time as the introduction of Backward for Xbox One, which was a really big move by Microsoft, Sony took another step to do something similar. Players could stream older PS3 games and experience it by purchasing a PlayStation Now subscription on the PlayStation 4 console. The result was the launch of plenty of 7th-generation games for Sony's new service, which greatly enhanced its game library. But there was a big problem. While Xbox players could easily download titles of previous generations, such a move would not have been possible for PlayStation Now users. Due to the sophisticated and staggering hardware design of the PlayStation 3 console, Sony still hasn't been able to find a way to download the console's games on new generation devices. Despite this, there was another solution ahead of Sony. On September 20, 2018, Sony announced that PlayStation 4 users can download PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 4 games offered through the service. Of course, this happened a year after the launch of the Xbox game service, which we are talking about as well. The new PlayStation service could now be satisfying both in terms of quantity and quality of games. With continuous support and the addition of new features such as 1080p stream games, it was adding to the number of PlayStation Now users day by day. However, Sony's policy never revolved around service support. Maybe we should take a look at Microsoft's actions in this regard now, but before that it's best to go to Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts had long since started its services project on the proprietary Origin platform. In August 2014, it launched a service called EA Play for Xbox One. But what effect did the construction and supply of new services have on Electronic Arts products? The publisher's main focus early in the 8th generation was on the PC platform, and the services also provided players with richer content from the Origin platform. Electronic Arts games began to take on the color of co-op and online axes. Rich fictional experiences in EA products faded, and the audience of single-player games gradually fell apart from the company's trend. Unfortunately, the quality of the products was not very interesting, and most games failed due to influential in-app payments and lack of content. However, Electronic Arts did not have much to worry about selling its titles due to services such as Origin Access and Origin Access Premier. Electronic Arts' performance in the 8th generation, and even at the beginning of the 9th generation with games like Battlefield 2042, is an incorrect example of service-based policies in making different games. An example is that mismanagement can even fail service-related projects. Microsoft took a similar policy at the beginning of the 8th generation and experienced a major setback in many projects, including Fable Legends and State of Decay. Even these misguided policies led to the closure of several studios, including Lionhead. Fortunately, with the new management of Phil Spencer, Microsoft's policies saw serious changes. A big gamble was planned by the company, which was headed by a service called Xbox Game Pass. Spencer and the Xbox team realized that they had lost fans' trust in their products, and no matter what games they produced, they would probably never achieve the commercial success they want for different projects. In order to regain this trust, two tasks were needed. One was to change the policy of revenue and the other was to build high-quality games that went through the purchase of talented game studios. Game Pass was first released on June 1, 2017. But what in a short period of time distinguished the Game Pass from other services and turned it into a big winning leaf was the company's exclusive gaming offering on the service. Microsoft initially made all of its old exclusive games available to service audience, then, in a surprise and unpredictable move, announced that all of the company's upcoming exclusive games will be released on the day of launch, for the Game Pass service. This was big news, as it separated Microsoft's way into the whole of other service providers in the not-too-distant future, influenced the competing company's policy as well. Sony did not have Microsoft's initial budget and could not risk its main source of revenue due to relative bankruptcy in other parts of the hardware. While fans have been waiting for years to announce similar news from Sony, Jim Ryan and other Sony executives have repeatedly emphasized that they have adopted a different policy. Of course, this difference had no effect on Sony's big exclusive game sales, but the company knew that sooner or later it would have to make a decision to compete, otherwise it would be out of the competition altogether. Microsoft didn't sit quietly and started buying studios terribly. First smaller studios such as Ninja Theory and Obsidian, and then the lottery fell into the name of largest publishers, Bethesda and Activision. Now Microsoft had become one of the game industry's busiest parent companies. Apart from raising the value of Xbox purchases, this also pushes the value of buying Game Pass higher. It seemed that all of Microsoft's focus is on Game Pass. Starting with Stream and Cloud, along with the launch of gameplay on various platforms such as PC and mobile, the range of game contacts grew. Microsoft plans to transcend its ecosystem of physical consoles, which is why some experts claim that the 9th generation will be the latest generation of physical consoles. With Microsoft's extensive advertising, it was added to the service's audience day by day, sounding the alarm for Sony. As anticipated, Sony reacted and made big changes to its policies. In the first place, Sony also went on to buy studios, and its main goal was to expand its expert forces in the construction of service-based games. In the last year alone, Sony bought many studios, including Haven, Bluepoint and Bungie. According to Sony officials themselves, Bungie purchases were made to produce service-based games, and as we know, several service-based games are under construction by Sony's domestic studios. That wasn't the whole story. Bloomberg announced Sony's new service last year. Sony intended to make key changes to the structure of its services, which arguably announced the company's increased focus on its services. This happened, and Sony's services merged and were presented to the audience in 3 different categories. Sony is likely to release a lot of content in the future that are dependent on the service. Like it or not, the expansion of Game Pass and Microsoft's policies as Sony's competitor made major changes to its policies that if we had told a gamer until a few years ago, it would surely have passed with a grin. Ubisoft recently launched its gaming service and is set to make it available for consoles soon. All the events that have happened in the last few years show that publishers with a new perspective are looking to monetize the game industry. There may still be a choice for buyers, but the focus of builders is shifting to the other side. Rockstar may be the only exception to this policy, as the company can continue to make money forever with a similar formula. The popularity of the GTA series is unattainable and unsustainable. Games will change according to the services. Perhaps their quality will get better or worse, and perhaps their content will become less and more, which can be called definitively changing the game industry for several years to come. Perhaps, as experts predict, we won't see physical consoles built in the 10th or 11th generation. Don't that make sense to you? Companies like Microsoft and Sony have made several dollars by supplying and selling each console, and they compensate for this loss by selling software. When one can have the same revenue without releasing hardware, why would a gaming company build a console? Assuming all 100 million PlayStation audiences access cloud services online, Sony could more profits from software sales. Be sure that if the services and streaming continue to progress, the physical consoles will reach the end of their way, although that day is far away, but not out of reach. Nintendo's situation, on the other hand, is quite different. From the 7th generation, the company all its way out of consular warfare and moved forward with its own policies. Now Nintendo owns a market that has no competitors and poses no risk unless a company tries to enter the market for handheld consoles, which is unlikely. Although Nintendo also uses a variety of online services that give players the possibility to experience older console games, it has never taken a policy similar to Microsoft and Sony, and is unlikely to do so. Phil Spencer has repeatedly expressed his interest in offering a Game Pass service on the Nintendo Switch console, which we all know is impossible. Nintendo never needs such a service, but maybe when the expiry date of the physical consoles arrives, there will be a change in attitude. It should be noted that buying more studios and publishers is also effective in accelerating this process. Microsoft already has 2 of America's largest publishers in its grip, and it is unclear whether we will see another purchase in the future. The mobile market itself is the largest and most lucrative market in the game industry. Imagine cloud gaming finding its way into this market, whether it's the flood of huge audiences that won't enter the gaming industry's publishers' ecosystem. What do you think of this process? Satisfied with the current direction of the game industry? Do you think the game industry's centric service is beneficial for the industry, or does it cause losses? Be sure to share your comments with me in comments section.